Phillip Kennedy Johnson, the writer of many, many cool comic books. Of course, I'm the John Johnson. Well, we're gonna talk some comic books here, and I think we're gonna have a good time. I'm gonna start this off with a simple question.
Sure.
And that is a really nerdy question too. When writing two uber powerful characters like Superman and the Hulk, do you, in your mind, start thinking, well, the Hulk right now can beat Superman?
I don't. No, I don't think about it in those terms, I guess. There's such different kinds of stories, and there's almost it's kind of hard to imagine one eating the other. I know they fought in the past, but I don't know, man. Like for a Superman story, at least to me, first of all, thank you all for being here. It's great to see you all here, and I'd love to have any questions from any of you at the end if you have any. When I'm writing a character like Superman, at least to me, the only reason that the powers should be there on the page should be to illustrate how incorruptible he is. If you have him like knocking stuff down or like kicking somebody's butt just because he can do it, that's not that can be any book, like any superhero story, any kind of genre comic. Superman stories are set apart because of how Superman is the living antithesis of the idea that power corrupts. Like absolute power corrupts absolutely. Superman is the antithesis to that idea. So when we see him using his power, it needs to be somehow contrasted with some element of his compassion, of his humility, of how much he loves us. It can't be just like, I'm awesome. Hulk is that I'm awesome thing. When you see a Hulk throwdown, like the Hulk book right now in our care is a straight up monster book, and I kind of in keeping with the original Stan Lee Kirby kind of vision for what Hulk was. It was supposed to be a story in which the monster of the movie is the main character. It was meant to be kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde / Frankenstein kind of a thing. And over the years, he kind of like Hulk kind of got sucked into more of the superhero type stories. He was in the Avengers, and now everything kind of changed. But I am very partial to stories like Planet Hulk, to Immortal Hulk. Those stories where he is legit like the monster, and not necessarily the bad guy, but no less the monster for that. So it's kind of become this big Hulk versus kind of book where he's in issue 1 we set up this new status quo where he's kind of like Hulk has kind of become this lightning rod for all the creatures of Earth and all profane things on Earth, and they all kind of find him as he travels. He's kind of walking the Earth like King from Kung Fu, and all these monsters find him, and so we see him tested against these eldritch horrors or these folk monsters from yesteryear, or sometimes from Marvel. Marvel's past. But with Superman, like an example of Superman showing his power is when we saw him face Metallo in my Rise of Metallo arc, and towards the end of that, we see Metallo has leveled up quite a bit himself. He's got that Genesis mineral in him now, and he's just uber powerful now. We see him; he's transformed quite a bit. He's kind of become this organic kind of, this techno-organic kind of adaptation of what he usually is. And Superman shows us, he extends his biokinetic aura and becomes this gigantic construct of himself, and just obliterates Metallo in this huge show of force. But once he's been taken down, in the comic he's like, okay, well now let's go. I know your sister's in trouble. Let's go get her out. And he's like, I was about to kill your children. I was about to kill you and your whole family. Like, you're gonna help me now? And he said, yeah, I mean, anybody would do that. And Metallo was like, I wouldn't. And Superman said, well, maybe not yet, but someday. He believes in us. Like now that you're not going to kill my kids, I'm going to help you get your sister back. We're going to be allies, and it's all going to be okay. That's what sets a Superman story apart. So his power is only there to illustrate how incorruptible and compassionate and humble he is. And Hulk is like not the opposite of that thing, but it's certainly not the same.
I have to ask, with both of those characters, they have some really established supporting cast. I mean,
Yeah.
both of them have a pretty diverse and interesting supporting cast. How important are they to both books and in the way you're writing them?
They are pretty important. I wanted to me, they're important because I know the fans want to see them. You can tell a Superman story without the whole cast. You can tell a Hulk story without the whole cast. But I know fans want to see him. Like I told the Warworld saga, and that was a story that took place largely off Earth. And there were fans who were like, "We want to see Lois, we want to see Jimmy, we want to see Superboy, we want to see all these other characters." And I did try to show some of that on Earth while this is all going on. But the Bendis run, right before my run, had done such a thorough job of humanizing Superman and showing the whole cast, showing the Daily Planet and the day-to-day of that place, and all, like, Cat Grant and Jimmy and all like everybody. Like, we saw a lot of that on Earth. We saw a lot of the the workplace dynamics, and that's all cool. But I thought it was time to put the Super back in Superman and make it this larger than life, crazy space epic story. I wanted to do like Spartacus in space, And there wasn't a huge part for the supporting cast in that particular story. And then when I brought it back to Earth, then I really tried to pay all that off. I tried to give fans some fan service and bring back the whole cast and really like do like a super family book after that, so that everyone got the character that they really wanted to see. But I before I came to comics, I came from music, from the world of music. And to me, I often think about this thing that Thelonious Monk often said. He was the great jazz piano player and composer. And something that he said, speaking as an improviser, a jazz improviser, he would say this thing, revere the melody. And when you hear him improvising on one of his own compositions, like if you hear him play like Round Midnight or Straight No Chaser or Rhythm-a-Ning or any of his other many songs, it would start from the theme, and it would kind of gradually spool its way out and become like this much more responsive, interactive kind of a thing, and then kind of spool back in at the end, back to some idea of the theme again, very much like a conversation, where if like I just met John, and so we started with the usual social niceties, like, "Hey, you're going to be here today? It's nice to meet you. This is my name," like, blah blah blah, like the way any conversation would start, like very simple and nice, and kind of work its way out. If I just jumped right in and was like, "Did you see that debate last night? What a jerk!" And like just out of the blue, if I just like went just like hit the ground running into something that he doesn't want to talking about, it would be very off-putting. But we have to kind of get to know each other, and it gets bigger, and it becomes something more interesting and complicated and unique, and then brings it back to the theme where we began. All right. So anyway, that's kind of how I approach the characters. I try to revere the melody anytime I am writing a character, and try to think like, what is it that makes this a Hulk story? What is it that makes this a Superman story? What is it that makes Alien what it is? And just make sure that the theme is always very prominent. The story becomes what it becomes, and it becomes a unique thing that no one else could tell, but the theme has to always be present. So if that helps at all. And the characters like Jimmy is such a really cool part of the Superman mythos, but you can tell an important Superman story without that element of it. It's all about the theme, really.
Are you thinking musically when you write these things, or are you? You're saying you have a theme in your head, but are you thinking musically, like getting the certain flow of the story as a musical?
I'm not necessarily thinking about music when I'm doing it, but I find that I'm flexing a lot of the same muscles. I'm writing it very much the way I would compose a piece.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it does feel very similar.
Okay.
In the way that the story comes together, but also in the way that in the collaborative nature of the creative team. Comics just feels like small group jazz to me, where it's except it happens one step at a time. Like when you're playing small group jazz with like a quintet or something, if you replace any one person in the band, the whole thing changes. If you change out the bass player, it changes what everyone else is doing. If they're listening, if nobody's in a silo and they're all listening to what everyone else is doing, they should be responsive to what they're hearing from the rest of the group. And comics is very much like that too. It's the steps happen initially one at a time. Like first there's a concept, and then the script. The script goes to the penciler, goes to the inker, that goes to both the colors and the letter at the same time, and then it kind of all comes together. But nobody should be just doing their job and sending it and then not thinking about it.
Right.
You know, it should be very responsive. You should be. So I send my script to the artist. They and I will have a conversation about it. We'll talk about what they want to see different. We'll talk about what their ideas. I'll adjust. I'll adapt, which I have to do today on Hulk, or is my ass. I need to get Hulk in today. The script is done in theory, but it's never really done until the book is done. And I heard back from Nick. I was like, I'd really like another splash page someplace. Like, how big do you want this tree thing to be? And like, how do you, this. So I've got to address all that today. And then it goes back to Nick. And then hopefully Nick will have this dream come true script that he can't wait to draw and he feels very invested in. And then that will go to he'll ink it himself. Then it'll go to the colorist and we'll have conversations with them too. It should continue to become music all the way through the process. It can't just be like, well, my job's done. Now I'll do the next one. And I don't need to think about this one anymore. I need to continue to be interacting with the rest of the creative team throughout the whole process until it's like on shelves.
That's really nice. And have you, well, let's put it this way, have you worked with anyone or even one character that you feel has hit that perfect groove and you just love working with them and want to continue to work with them for a long, long time?
Character or an artist or
both, either.
Yeah, I mean, I could write Superman forever. I know my Superman run right now is done per se, but it's not done. I'm going to do more. Yeah. So I hope to do more Superman very soon. Man, I'm having a good time on Hulk. And when I came on Hulk, I was not the guy that bought every Hulk book. I've got my Hulk books that I like very much, that I kind of look to for inspiration. But honestly, I also think a lot about other books like Hellboy when I think about Hulk. I think there's a lot that I can learn from the Hellboy runs when I'm writing my Hulk stuff, and Hellblazer too, and kind of other books that are influential.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, there are others too, like things that are not necessarily even monster books. Like there's a great adaptation of Beowulf that I admired very much by Rubin and Garcia. That's I think originally it might have been printed in Spanish, but I have it in English. Super powerful book, and I just the way that book came together, I looked to that one for inspiration as well. God, what's another one? And I just looked to other stories as I'm bringing this together. But yeah, as far as artists I love to work with, man. I only worked with Mikhail Hanin very briefly, but I love that guy.
Yeah,
Mikhail Hanin is so unbelievably great.
It's amazing art. Yeah.
Whenever I give him, he and I did the Superman Future State issues together, Worlds of War, and I just could not believe how good he was, but also how responsive he was to notes. Like we would talk back and forth about ideas. I put something in the script and it comes back looking either exactly as I envisioned it or somehow better. And he would also, when he sends back the inks, he actually letters it himself, not with final letters, but he was like, here's what I imagine the balloons will go. He makes space for the balloons as he's doing the art. Not every artist does that. No. Many artists just think about the art as if that was all there would be. And then you have to kind of, crack the code on where to put the lettering, where it's not going to cover anything up, and how it will, best impact the flow, like the line of eye stuff. Mikhail just thinks about all that stuff. It was just a dream come true. It's like Mikhail was inside my head the whole time. It's incredible.
That's very cool. In the case of Superman and the Hulk, obviously you have a preference for Superman. I see that. You really, really enjoy Superman.
I mean, I do, but Hulk is such a different thing. And
well, that's the thing. They're very similar in certain ways, but they're also vastly different. So.
Oh my God. Yeah, and Nick Klein. I always feel bad in singling out any artist because then it's like, well, the other ones must be less cool or less good or something else. I've just been so, blessed with amazing artists to work with. Nick Klein on Hulk doing the Lord's work. He's just in his own life, he's not even really that big of a horror savant. It's not like he doesn't consume horror stuff all day long or anything like I do sometimes. But you wouldn't know it to look at his artwork. He is like, this is such nightmarish transformations. I kind of tee him up with these descriptions of god awful transformations. Like whenever I see banners kind of swell up big and green and become the Hulk, like no, that's not it. I want to see pain. I want to see like his skull plates like coming apart and refusing larger, and like Hulk's teeth pushing out his other teeth, and like fingernails growing, and like collarbones popping out of skin, and like I want to see how much it hurts. I want to see how scared he is of the next transformation. And Nick does all that just unbelievably well. It's just incredible how good he is. And Danny Earls, the fill-in artist, is equally great. And his skills are so different, but so powerful. And he's a new guy. He's only been in comics for like a little while. He's just crushing it. My artist on Batman and Robin, I'm just getting started with, is just born to draw Batman. Man, I can't wait for everyone to see that book.
Who is the artist?
Javi Fernandez is his name, and he's been drawing Batman just for the hell of it for years already. He's like, I just love Batman. He'll draw like just fan art of Batman that looks better than any you've ever seen. He did Nightwing, what's it called, Nightwing Reborn or something for like 2017. He drew that book. Man, in my opinion, Batman is where he belongs. I've got stuff on my phone that'll blow your mind. He's just so good.
How soon is that?
October.
There we go.
Yeah, and it's a very different. I mean, for Josh Williamson's run on Batman and Robin, Simone, that drew that book, was a perfect fit for it. It was like it's very dynamic and stylized and light, like kind of lighthearted kind of a style. It made perfect sense for Josh's vision for that story. For my story, it's very different. It's like I want to see a foggy, rainy Gotham with a murder mystery, like a proper detective noir kind of story, and that's what this is. Like if you like Long Halloween, if you like Court of Owls, if you like The Doom That Came to Gotham, man, this book is going to be lit as hell. And Javi's art is just perfect for it.
Is this contemporary with the current Robin, or is this
current Robin? Yeah. It's him and Damien.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time keeping up with all the different changes they're doing and which character is what.
Sure, I get it. But, well, plus Mark Waid is about to do his Batman and Robin Year One, which I imagine will be kind of dick. That's going to be really fun.
I hope so.
But it'll be quite different than this, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I've introduced a new villain for this story named Memento, and he's kind of a cross between, how would you describe it? Kind of like an Aleister Crowley / Jack the Ripper kind of a character that gives me the Gotham that I want to see. You're gonna love it. I'm so into it, and Javi is perfect for it. And anyway, stay tuned. October.
Very cool. Very cool. So, does anyone have any questions? Because I know I have more, but I'd love to. Yeah, let's go.
Damon. Good.
So I asked Mark Waid this yesterday. I love your opinion on this as well. And it seems like in a large part of the last 4, 5, 6 years, thanks to you and Joshua Williamson, that there is a shift in the public kind of want for a Superman that's good, a wholesome Superman again. Why? Like, what would you regret towards that?
So for those who couldn't hear in the back, so there's been a desire to see like a more virtuous Superman, like a pure of heart kind of character. Man, I think, I don't know. Anytime I talk shit about the Snyder movies, I always people come to me. But whatever, let's fight. And the movies are great. Like I consider Zack Snyder a second to none visual storyteller, but his take on Superman, in my opinion, was a little dark. And there are elements of like the Kents and of his backstory and all that I think are just not quite. I don't know, man. I've got a young son who's here actually, wearing a Superman shirt like a good boy. Batman hat. He loves Superman, and I don't want him to not get to watch a Superman movie because it's scary. Because Superman is scary in it. It kind of bums me out. Like, I grew up with Christopher Reeve movies, and those movies might not be perfect, but for me, the Christopher Reeve depiction of Superman is perfect.
Yeah.
Like, for me, that's just it. And to hear him talk about Superman in private life too was the same way. Like, that dude just walked the walk, and I love that guy. My hat will always be off for Christopher Reeve, and the way that he depicted Superman as just our friend. Like somebody who. Like the helicopter scene in the first movie where he's got the helicopter in one hand, he's got Lois under his arm, and he's like, I've got you. She's like, you've got me, who's got you? And he kind of looks at her, gives her this smile, like, it's kind of funny. And the smile's not like, yeah, I'm awesome.
Right.
There's no ego in it. There's no, like, look how big and tough and imposing I am. It's like, no, I'm your friend. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. And even in the second movie where like Zod's there and he shows back up, he's got his powers back. He's like, General, you want to step outside? He's kind of that almost corny goodness and virtue that like, it's not like, yeah, I'm going to kill you. It's like, I can't let you do this. I'm not going to let anything bad happen to these people. It's that virtue that, man, I needed that real bad as a kid. Like that depiction of Superman. I was kind of this sad, lonely kid, and kind of got smacked around a lot, and just and then I found this movie. My first memory of Superman is not from the comics; it's from that film, and like just that story, like finding a story about this kid who who discovered that he was sent here by people who loved him to do great things. It's so powerful. And when I saw that, and like I'm hearing John Williams' music sail, just the opening credits, like.
Oh, that theme song.
And the S shield is like, as a little kid, I'm just like, yes. Like I just want to be what that is, Like that movie shaped my life. I'm a professional trumpet player now who writes Superman. like legit shaped my life.
I do have to ask you that. How did you transition from music to comic books? What was the big push to get to comics?
Actually, I got a younger brother so I wanted to be a comic artist. When I was a kid, I drew a lot too. I drew a lot of Superman, drew a lot of Batman, drew a lot of stuff. Just copied my favorite comics. I had a lot of second, third hand comics, and I just wanted to do that. I also like to write. I also love music, and over time, I kind of gravitated towards music. I just felt like I was better at it, and that was kind of my way out. And I got a younger brother who was also a musician and an artist, but he kind of went the other way. He wanted to be a comic artist and didn't know how to get started. So we had this conversation on the phone. He was going to community college and not really setting the world on fire. He was doing fine, but he wasn't loving it, and he just wanted to do comics. I was like, I want to do comics. I don't know what to do. I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Just living out in Kentucky where I grew up, and I was like, man, just come move in with me. Like, we'll figure it out. I missed comics. I hadn't been reading for fun in a long time, and he moved in with us, and we just kind of educated ourselves. We literally bought the How to Make Comics for Dummies book, and other much better ones, McCloud, and there's this great book by Andy Schmidt that we got from the library called Insider's Guide to Creating Comics and Graphic Novels, I believe. It was really good. And just kind of figured it out. I found a great shop. I found a lot of trade paperbacks that had like script excerpts in the back, and just figured out what strips looked like and how comics were made, and we just figured it out together. And I started writing stuff just for him to draw. And it was really fun and rewarding. Like as I say, I felt like music, and I just kind of got the bug. Started looking for other people to work with, and it's worked out.
Apparently. Apparently worked out real well for you. You got a question in the back there? Yeah.
How did you end up working with DC Comics?
Yeah.
So thanks for your question. So the my first printed book was one called Last Sons of America. It was a story in which Americans couldn't have kids anymore. Like there was this terrorist attack thing had happened, and Americans could no longer have kids. And so around the world, to make kids like money. It's this human trafficking story, basically. There's a little mini-series that I did at Boom Studios, and that book got noticed at DC. And then I did another book at Boom called Warlords of Appalachia that got noticed at Marvel. So while the Marvel guy was kind of throwing my book around Marvel, like, you gotta check these guys out, like not just me but the artists as well. There was somebody who was reading Last Sons of America. Brian Cunningham, the Justice League editor at the time, found Last Sons of America because he followed my artist, Matthew Dow Smith. And he reached out, like, hey, we're reading Last Sons in the office. Would you want to do some work at DC? And like, hell yeah. So at some point we had a meeting. Sorry, this is a hot mic. I'm sorry. Let's see. So I was talking to Brian, and he was like, so here are the books that I edit. Like, would you want to do an inventory issue? So an inventory issue, for those who don't know, I don't even know if DC still does them. I think they probably do. An inventory issue is, so there's got to be a Batman book on the shelf every month. Okay, so if the creative team gets behind, or if there's some kind of a transition of creative teams or something, they have kind of like a one-shot issue that they can just plug in whenever. Those inventory issues are a great way to try out new talent. So they'll put together a creative team to do an inventory issue as kind of a tryout. Or sometimes they'll have them do like a short story for an anthology or an annual or something. So he was like, okay, so the books I do, I've got Green Lantern, I've got Green Lantern Corps, I've got Flash, I've got Aquaman, do Constantine, I've got something. What would you be interested in? I was like, Constantine all day. I will write the shit out of a Constantine book. I've read every word he's ever said in a comic. And he was like, oh, what I really need is Aquaman. I was like, well, that's what I meant. Like, let's do Aquaman. I'm so into Aquaman. I love Aquaman. That was a total lie. And I didn't know anything about Aquaman. And I started looking for. I just mainlined Aquaman. I was like, okay, let's do this. And I read everything I could find for Aquaman, try to figure him out because I don't know anything about that character. And like basically, I knew like the Super Friends, and that was about it. So I figured out Aquaman. I ended up writing a 2-issue. Just a 2-issue annual story for Aquaman that ended up becoming the 2018 annual then. And that was just dumb luck because I did it and it turned out beautifully. Max Fumar did the art. Dave Stewart colored it. At the time, he was winning all the Eisners for color. He's just stupid talented. The book turned out beautifully. So 2 issues, so like 40 pages. And then around that time, they were double shipping a lot of stuff back then. Meaning like 2 issues a month, and it was killing everybody.
Oh, right,
like it was
right.
like they were double shipping a lot of their more popular books, which means they have to like rotate like 3 creative teams to keep up with that pace because nobody's that fast, except Dan Mora apparently, but he wasn't around yet. So the following year, in 2018, they're like, we're double shipping. We're like everyone's just like barely making it. We're pulling all nighters constantly. They're like, oh my god, we got an annual next month. What are we gonna do? And he's like, we got 2 issues. We can just plug in there. So like just because they were so frantic, like great, we got 2 issues. We'll turn it into an annual. So there's like a cliffhanger on page 20, and I was like, page 21. But anyway, that was my way into DC. It was that Aquaman annual.
Was it really well received?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't have as big of a readership as some of their bigger titles, but it was very well received. Yeah, I was very proud of that book, and it turned out great. And that led to more work. People in the office started noticing, and I started getting more work over there.
When did you move on over to Marvel? Was it pretty quickly and within the time frame of doing all the stuff in DC?
Yeah, it was roughly the same time.
Yeah.
And at the time, Marvel was celebrating their 80th anniversary. I think it's like some shady math there. I think it was like the company that predated Marvel. I think if you add that all up as Marvel time, it turned out to 80 years.
Yeah.
But they celebrated the 80th with some old dead series that are not around anymore. They kind of re-released like House of Mystery or House of whatever. Like War is Hell was one of them. Not House of Mystery. I can't remember what that one was called. But they had a like weird something strange tales. I can't remember like one of those kind of
They Strange Tales.
Yeah. So they put out some of those just one shots, kind of celebrating those old titles, and one of them is this war book called War is Hell, and the guy who had been championing my Warlords of Appalachia book was like, "There's this guy in the army or something, and he writes comics. Like, you want to get you get the token soldier dude to write a war book." So they got Howard Shakin to do a 10-pager, and then it's like, there's nobody to write the backup, like the next 10 pages. I was like, whatever, like Shakin's gonna clean my clock, but I'm not gonna say no. And it actually turned out great. So Shakin did a 10-pager about it's not a very warlike story that Shakin did. It was a really heady kind of book about kind of music in World War II, about the death of Glenn Miller essentially.
Okay.
And he drew and wrote it. It was really cool, but not what I think it was like a high octane war story. But I didn't know what Shakin was even doing, so I wrote a 10-pager based on the story that I knew of a friend of mine who, like a ranger who had gone on these night raids for years in Iraq and Afghanistan. It basically tells the story of PTSD as an African folktale, where it makes PTSD into this like a lesser spirit of the plains of Africa from the dawn of man that became the first hunter of men. And this thing that passes through blood, like spilled blood, like you kill someone and you get their blood on you, and then what was in them is now in you, and it kind of like the supernatural virus almost, and that's like the story of PTSD essentially. So that was my 10-pager. That is now in my Hulk second volume. It was called War Devil, and that became the bad guy. We actually made an actual monster out of it called Genie de Gaulle, the War Devil, and that was what Ghost Rider 44 and Hulk face in Hulk issues, let's see, 6, 7, 8, I believe. Anyway, so yeah, that was my first Marvel story, and it was around the same time.
Doubling up with Chaykin is
Yeah.
fun there.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool to get to meet him too. He and I met, and if you haven't met Howard Chaykin, he's got this encyclopedic knowledge of music and theater. And so when I met, I was like, "Hey, I used to play in the Glenn Miller band." He's like, "What? Let's talk for a long time, and not about comics."
Oh.
So we talked. We got kind of jammed on music for a while. But yeah, really fascinating guy, and it was really an honor to share a book with him.
Absolutely, I can see that. Now I want to go find this thing because I remember when they published these, but I didn't really glom onto them because one shots at the time were just a little bit too much. But
Sure.
Now I want to find the damn thing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the 10-pager is collected in my second Hulk volume now.
Okay, very cool, awesome. You had a question?
Yeah, you said that you looked at like horror for
Mhm.
the Hulk.
Mhm.
Are we talking the Universal horror or like the Hammer films horror that you reference?
Forgive my ignorance. When you say Hammer films, what do you mean?
The films from Britain, like Christopher Lee's Dracula,
Oh.
Peter Cushing.
Forgive
and all
me, yeah.
that.
Well, clearly I don't know as much about those as I should. I just mean, honestly, I think more horror books and comics, but also like, Hellboy or Ice Cream Man or older one, like the creepy, eerie books, like the Warren Publishing and the, all that stuff. Like those are kind of what I mean. But also, I don't know, just wherever any kind of meaningful storytelling. I draw inspiration from comics, from prose, from music. The music of Peter Maxwell Davies is not a name I expect anyone to know. Some video games, honestly, I find the storytelling in The Last of Us extremely compelling. The world building in Elden Ring is very effective, I think. But also, a lot of films, of course, and shows.
Go for it.
You mentioned the fact that it's important for keeping the same theme,
Mm-hmm.
and you think that it is important that some characters, the heroes, keep doing what they have been done.
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, you also think that you also fall into the situation where it's difficult to go where you want to go with the possibility to using the same tools. I don't know if that makes sense. So, what is, in your opinion, a mix of superheroes or even a new one that you find that should better serve where you want to go in terms of stories or new things that you might want to do and that maybe you cannot do because Superman is Superman.
So it sounds like you're asking, how do you break new ground and tell new stories while staying true to the theme?
Well,
Or how do you explore new themes?
is staying with the old characters and then you go only up to a certain amount of reinterpretation. Otherwise, you risk to change. Okay. So my point is, you have a story, an idea, something that you want to communicate that you cannot do because you're still in Superman cannot do certain kind of things. So what would be the idea of the hero that can share this message that you want? If you have one, I'm just curious because you see, after a long time that you work on the same subject, sometimes, well, maybe my job is different, but certain point you say, okay, I want to go there, I cannot do this. If only I had this,
So I thank you for your question. It's a very thoughtful question. I appreciate that. It is. There's something to talk about there for sure.
Yeah.
If there's a message or a theme I want to explore that is not appropriate to, if I don't feel like I can tell a certain story with a certain character, I will tell the story with a different character as its vessel. Does that make sense? Like there are some stories I would never tell as a Superman story. But I do think that to say that there's only so far you can take an existing character, I don't know. I guess I don't feel that way. Like again, to forgive all the music analogies, but to go back to like the concept of the jazz standard. The jazz standard is not like a new jazz. Like if I compose a new jazz song today, that's not a standard. A standard would be like an old show tune from like Tin Pan Alley from 100 years ago that is now played and reinterpreted for generations after that. Like a jazz standard would be The Way You Look Tonight. So it's an old song from an old show, an extremely old show, older than anyone here, that has been performed and reimagined and even done with different harmonic structures and all that for by jazz musicians for since for 100 years. Or you could arguably call Round Midnight a jazz standard, even though it's not really a show tune or anything. It's an original composition by Thelonious Monk from the 40s, probably. Round Midnight is one of those songs that is simple on its face. Like you could hear it. It's like it's like not. It's simple, but it's also there's this great depth and nuance to it. You can study that song for the rest of your life and continue to find more nuance and subtlety in it and complexity that you didn't hear the first time that I could not hear before. I'll study that song the rest of my life and hopefully continue to get better at it. Round Midnight is Batman. Like Round Midnight is to jazz as Batman is to comics. If you walk around Artist Alley, you will see 100 different artists doing their take on Batman, on Daredevil, on Superman, on Wonder Woman. These are the jazz standards of the medium of comics. And to say that, well, Batman's always going to look a certain way, they have not seen Batman done by Ian Bertram or by Daniel Warren Johnson or by, Frank Miller of a certain time as opposed to Frank Miller now, as opposed to Jim Lee of a certain time as Jim Lee now, or some up-and-comer will put their stamp on Raphael Grandpa as an unbelievably iconic Batman. And before he had drawn Batman, Batman was seen as only being like a certain way. But then somebody comes along and changes the game. So like with the Warlord Saga, I wanted to tell a story about human trafficking. And that's an extremely dark subject. And so on the Warlord Saga, it was human trafficking. When he came back to Earth, it became a story about refugees. These are stories that matter a lot to me. There's also stuff in there about QAnon, about the MAGA movement, about whatever. There's things in there that are extremely relevant to right now that, had no place in comics from 40 years ago, but I use Superman as the vehicle for those stories to be told right now, while still staying true to Superman's theme as the champion of the oppressed. Like Superman is, as described in Action Number 1, Superman is the champion of the oppressed. That mattered back then, and it matters now, just in different context. So I find that you can still continue to develop and grow really powerful stories, just building them, like starting from the theme of champion of the oppressed, and then building out from it the way the conversation does, the way we discussed, the way, the work of Thelonious Monk does, and bring it back to the champion of the oppressed at the end, show who Superman is at his core, while telling a very nuanced, deep, sometimes dark kind of story. And if there's a story that has no place in a Superman story, if I'm telling something for example, you will never see like evil Superman in my books. Like we've seen plenty of that, and there's if I want to tell a story about somebody like a story like Irredeemable, like that is an evil Superman book.
Right.
But Superman's not in it. It's about another character. Superman's not evil. Like the theme is champion of the oppressed. So if the theme is what if Superman went bad, that's not a Superman theme. That is a different theme. And instead of telling that in the context of a Superman story, you tell it in the context of Irredeemable or The Boys or something different. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So start it first, and then the character into the story.
I would say character first. Yeah, character first. And if you're not telling the story that you want to tell with that story, then it belongs in it needs a different character at its center.
Have you run into that while you're writing?
Kind of. I have an idea for a Captain America story that I can't really do as Captain America. Yeah, like I think that. Thank you, Daniel. I think the idea of Captain America is fascinating in that he is. So very often people will say something like, "So you've written Captain America?" And that's like he's like just like Superman, right? And the answer is no. He's very different from Superman. Captain America is a soldier. And you have to understand on some level, even if it doesn't show up on the page, Captain America has killed shitloads of people. Okay? And you have to just kind of understand that. He's a soldier. He is, at a certain point, he was the perfect American soldier. However, he's not the perfect American soldier today. He was the perfect American soldier in the 30s and 40s. That looks very different now. So I'm fascinated by that. I would love to tell a Captain America story where we see somebody who was the perfect idyllic soldier of the United States back in the day, before all these changes that we've seen happen in the States. However, I won't tell a Captain America story in which he is, a racist, misogynist, racist. There's all these problems that we would face, like they would a soldier like that from back in the day, who was perfect in that context, and now the world has come so far, in theory, hopefully. That's not a Captain America story anymore. That would be a story like an irredeemable situation where you tell a story about Captain America, but really it's a different character, so that the character of Captain America is not besmirched by this more complicated, dark kind of thing that I would want to tell. Does that make sense?
In this case, you are not having this story.
That story does not exist yet, and it may never. I think it would be really interesting to see Captain America explored as the perfect hero of yesteryear. Whenever I do write Captain America, he speaks in a certain way that is kind of corny and antiquated because he talks like a guy from the 30s and 40s. He gets really frustrated with computers. There are fun things. There are fun ways that you can explore Captain America's old manness without making him a character that we can't root for anymore. So there are little ways that I write Captain America in a way that separates him from characters like Superman, without making him unpleasant, or hard to root for.
Have you run into problems where the editors are telling you like this can't work? You gotta change this plot line, or the character isn't built that way?
For the most part, I've not run into that. I get a lot of trust with the characters that I'm writing. I haven't seen. There was one time there was an editor note I thought was really dumb. What was it? And he's not there anymore. I can say. What was it? They suggested he do something really what I regarded as pretty douchey, and I was like, what was that? I can't remember. I probably shouldn't tell a story anyway. There was a time where I objected pretty strongly to something, and we ended up not. I was like, this is a mistake. We're not doing this. And on some level, I think I understood that if I took it higher, I would win. The real pushback that I have faced from editorial has been on licensed books, and I mean Batman and Superman, those are licensed too. But I've been talking like
other properties,
like Planet of the Apes or Alien. Actually, like Alien notes were the worst. At the beginning, it was fine, but at a certain point, there were like other stakeholders came in to kind of offer notes from Fox, offer notes on trying to protect the Alien property. But their idea of protecting the property was to make sure that nothing happened in the comic that had not happened verbatim on screen in a film, which I just found colossally lame. And they just want to see the dinner scene over and over and over again. They just want to see chest burster. Oh my God, there's a thing in his chest. Our minds are blown again. You can't do that. We're trying to capture that same reaction from fans. But you're not going to do that with showing the same shit over and over again. I'm sorry I curse so much. The only kid in here is mine. And Daniel. Sorry.
When it comes to writing all these characters, and there's a lot of backstory with all these characters, and there's a lot of history with all of them, and this includes the licensed comics too. These Fox characters, the aliens or Planet of the Apes or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Do you feel like you're boxed in a lot of the times with some of that?
Sorry, ask one more time.
Yeah, so if with all the backstory with all these things.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Do you feel contained because of so much of it?
Sometimes you have to just kind of decide what you're going to go with because, like on a character like Superman, his history is so long. Batman too, like
Sure.
they've been around so long. You can find, like I mean, when Superman first showed up, he didn't carry all the philosophical weight of being like the perfect representation of the human race like he is now. You know, he's not human. I mean, he just embodies how best to be human. You know, like he shows us the way in all things. Initially, he's almost like a bully, like a guy who bullied the bullies. And sometimes he can be a real jerk. And Batman too. You know, and Batman will kill people left and right, like dropping pianos on people and like all kinds of stuff. Like there's you know, what was it? It was a Catwoman did something. He was like put a pie in her face. It was like Papa Spank or something. Like just being a huge jerk. Stuff that just doesn't feel like Batman anymore at all. You know. So you have to kind of decide what's canon and what's not. Like, in a way, it almost gives you choice. It gives you options because it can't all be true. I know Grant likes to say that like, oh, it all happened. I'm like, cool. I don't feel that way. What's an example? Like, if we're talking about canon, like back in the day canon, all the way from the beginning to now, with like the original show, the cartoon show, the radio show, the old black and white stuff, if that all happened, then, you know, what's an example? Lex Luthor's origin is that he hates Superman because he started fire in their high school chemistry lab, and Superman blew it out and blew Lex's hair off or something. And that's why Lex Luthor hates Superman forever. Is that canon? The answer must be no. Okay, they can't tell that story now. And in 2024 comics, we've come a long way. The answer is no. That's not canon. Okay, I know it happened, but it didn't happen. So when there's stuff like that, things just goofy crap, you can just kind of choose what happened and what didn't. I know that in theory, Superman and Lex went to the same high school. In my head canon, then it's really stupid, and I'll never talk about it in a book. You know, like I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I want fans to be able to read my book and not be bogged down by a thing that doesn't really fit the voice for what I'm trying to tell in my book. So some things, I'm not actually saying they did not go to high school together because, yes, in canon they did go to high school together in Smallville. But that's not something I like to bring up in my books because it doesn't really fit the stories I'm telling in the books. So
sure.
Some things you just kind of like don't mention it. So people for whom the Smallville stories really matter, they still have that. You know, I'm not busting anybody else's headcanon with mine because I'm just not bringing that stuff up. So that's usually how I handle it. I just kind of leave things out when it doesn't fit the story that I'm telling without actually saying, no, this is now truth.
And then with the licensed books, you have a lot less leeway to do things. Obviously, they were saying.
Yeah, like with Alien, there's so much less to draw from. So Alien I am more fettered with things like Alien. An example from Alien, there's a moment in the first issue actually of Alien in which we show a flashback when the main character first came in contact with the aliens, and he woke up in the nest, you know, and one of his comrades had a face hugger on his face. He was hanging upside down, and he had another one on like his crotch and one on his butt, and the Fox people were horrified. They were like, you're a monster, B, we're not going to do this. Like, it's called a face hugger. I'm like, yeah, but not everything has a face. Like, the whole power of the aliens that it's so versatile. And like, it can change anything. It's just looking for any opening. If it's found somebody with a wound, that would be fine. You know, like it doesn't need to be a face. And actually it was this big knife fight that went on for like a week. And I had to go back and I had to show them. I drew upon David's journals from Covenant, and you see David with those books. For those who've seen them, I actually read all that stuff. And there's kind of a proto face hugger that he talks about in there that was looking for an orifice, and I had to kind of prove, like I had to prove to them, look, I know more about this than you, and this is how it's in the movies. And so stuff like that. Like I have to often just kind of have these big arguments that go on, these long protracted discussions about what's okay and what's not. Yeah. But it's definitely much more limiting than when you've already got all these contradictions that have happened over the generations. You know, that gives you kind of a lot more options about what to pull from and what to ignore.
How about the Superman versus aliens? Would you be into doing something like that?
I would love to.
Yeah.
I would have to give it some real thought, because they are like completely opposing like themes. If we're talking about thematic stuff again, like Superman is the champion of the oppressed, and Alien is this deep nihilistic stuff, like about corporations and the dawn of life. Like the alien is this ancient unknowable thing that just kind of waits in deep space for something to get intelligent enough to pop its head up, and then it knocks us back down and keeps us small. Like it's this awful unknowable thing that keeps the universe clean of life. And Superman's like the opposite of that, right? So it would take a lot of thought, like how, like Superman who would not kill this living organism, how would the story like that play out? But I would love to. It'd be really interesting for sure. I know it's already been done, but if I already do my own take on it, I would want to tell a deeply like meaningful story, hopefully.
Well, considering how many Batman versus Predator there were, there
Yeah.
could always be another Superman versus Alien.
Yeah,
So.
I'd love. Yeah, I mean, if they do one, I want to get that call. That would be really fun.
Then you'd have to wrangle all kinds of stuff. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. We got about 10 minutes left. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
So you had said that you're a jazz musician.
Yeah.
So I know that Kyle Higgins recently did Deep Cuts. Have you read that, or have you read, Harvey P. Carr's more, jazz oriented?
I've read Picard stuff. Yeah, I've not read Kyle's book yet.
Okay. And do you still listen? Have you listened to Kamasi Washington's new album? Like, do you listen to newer?
I need to catch up. Like lately, I have been really in the weeds, like with writing, and I need to catch up more on like what's coming out now. I still have stuff that I kind of come back to. See, musicians that I turn to these days that I still kind of look back to all the time. I still keep up with what Kenny Garrett's doing. I keep up with what Nicholas Payton's doing. God, who else? I love the music of Brad Mehldau, the piano player. So yeah, I need to go back to like Downbeat magazine and see what's out there.
And also, do you think there's any stories that could be told about like territory bands in the first half of last century, like the touring regional bands?
Yeah, it would have to be character driven. So it would be more personal story set. Like that would be like the setting. You know what I mean? But yeah, totally. I mean, like stories need to be about characters with like very personal struggles and dramas, and then that like the being in a territory band like that would be a really cool setting actually for a story. I'd have to think about like what story would fit over a background like that, but that would be dope.
Very cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. You talking about, I think, a deadline coming up, and it made me think about like being curious about your writing style and practice. Are you like writing 9 to 5? Or you just write whenever an idea comes to you, like are there certain spots that you feel like you write best? I'm just curious about like kind of the day-to-day of it, what that looks like.
Man, it's 9 to 9 again. It's
24 hours of family while
yeah, it's I just kind of have to write in the cracks. Like whenever like I'm here right now, my computer is literally touching me right here. Like, and I'll be writing before my next Battlefield 3. And like last night, I wanted to make sure I hung out with Ben Percy last night. Ben's a dear friend. He's writing Wolverine, Ghost Rider, if you don't know. And I'm hanging out with him and Jason Aaron and Scott Snyder. People I don't see that much.
Yeah.
So we're hanging out, but I still have a thing to turn in. So I would go back to the room and I would write until I literally fall asleep, and then I pick up again in the morning before I go to the floor. I have Microsoft Word on my phone, so I'm standing in line at the pharmacy, or I have a 5-minute break in rehearsal or whatever. I'm just writing whenever I can, even these like tiny little chunks of time, trying to get just a few more words in. It's like one more paragraph, just get a little bit closer. It's because I still have the Army career. I'm actually about to get out, but right now I'm still enlisted, and I'm trying to, I have stuff I care about. Still trying to do the day job soldier musician thing. I'm still trying to turn all my books in on time. I'm trying not to fall on my face as a dad. I do MMA when I can. Like there's stuff I want to do. I'm trying to keep up with everything, and I just have to write whenever I can. And sometimes I do have these big chunks of time that I fill with writing. Other times it's just like nickel and dime stuff throughout the day.
That is ridiculously impressive.
Thanks. I mean, if you saw my day-to-day, you might not feel that way. That's a lot. I feel like I age 3 years every year. My son has had a question for the
Oh, yeah, I can
week
remember.
since this. Yes, you're so cool. Any characters I want to do in the future?
Aquaman.
Aquaman. Actually, that is legit an answer. I did kind of fall in love with Aquaman. It's like I love that Atlantis is like it should be like this other planet under. I mean, if you go to Japan, it's so different. It's crazy, right? Like imagine going to Atlantis. You know,
Exactly.
I want it to feel crazy. Whenever I'm a little picky stuff like Aquaman stories. I want to see you go underwater and they're all just like white dudes wearing a kind of nondescript armor, speaking English, like with swords, all just kind of like whatever. I don't know. It just feels like I want to see architecture. I want to hear language fragments. I want to hear like different tribes of Atlanteans that have kind of come together in this communal place. I want like this New Orleans kind of Creole culture down there that all kind of meld different tribes and you see where they come from. I want to see different kinds of weapons. How do they work down there? How does the tech work? There's so much I want. The world building opportunities in Atlantis would be so dope. I would love to do a story like that. So someday, my boy, I will do some more Atlantis. Also, I love Wolverine. I have a Wolverine take that I think would be really fun. God, what else? Constantine. I still want my Hellblazer story. So if you can't read that until you're bigger, right? You'll like it. Be worth it.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites, so I'll definitely. When that happens, I will be right there.
Oh, thanks.
All right, folks, let's get a wind up here, but everybody put your hands together for.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
That was very good.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too. I'll have to check out more of your stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Way the hell.
Excelsior!